So I would love more accuracy of information, as they say they're the most transparent administration, which is the biggest lie told on American soil, I believe. It is the least transparent, it is the most corrupt, it is the one administration I have seen lie to us, even though we have an accurate documentation of their lies, even if we are witnesses to the lies.
Hey, welcome back to Freedom Insight. Today, Ilhan Omar appears in court under fresh pressure over alleged fraud allies, and you should care because it's your trust and tax money. According to the clip transcript, she slams the Trump administration as the biggest lie, saying it's least transparent and most corrupt. She claims we have accurate documentation of their lies and says we are witnesses to it. That sounds like panic, not leadership. Separately, reports allege a crackdown, arrests, deportations, and investigators zeroing in on political allies. Be honest, if this is already chaos, what happens when a judge reads the sentence? Most people don't live in DC politics. They just want the rules to be the same for everybody. And right now, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is back in the spotlight because there are claims and reports swirling around her family, her finances, and whether she's being looked at for ties to the Minnesota Somali fraud schemes people keep talking about. In plain English, the accusation is that taxpayer money meant for kids and communities gets abused, and that powerful people might be connected to it or benefit from it. If that's true, it's not politics. It's your money, your trust, and a government that starts feeling like a private club. What we can do is separate what's alleged from what's proven, and listen carefully to what's being said in the public record and in these transcripts. You're also going to notice something else. Corporate media suddenly gets shy when the target is one of their favorites. They'll run "democracy is dying" banners all day, but when the question is simple, who got paid, who signed off, who looked away, the volume drops real fast. So let's walk through what's being claimed here and what it would mean if the claims hold up. Before you hear the first excerpt, understand the frame. This isn't a court verdict. This is political speech, reactions, and allegations. The standard is basic. If someone says something, we label it as their claim. If there's an investigation mentioned, we treat it as reported, not as a conviction. That's how adults do this. Now, you're about to hear President Trump giving his blunt take on Omar and AOC plus 3. Focus on the wording and the accusation he's making, not as fact, but as the argument he's putting on the table.
Think of that Ilhan Omar. She lives in Somalia. They don't have a government, they don't have a military, they don't have police, they don't have anything. All they have is murder and robbing ships, bringing in ships, pirates. That's stopped. Same missile, ping. That's the end of them. It's amazing how that can stop corruption. Those missiles, they never miss, you know. The same one, exactly the same one. But think of it, she comes from a country with nothing, and she comes here and she tells us about our Constitution. I have a constitutional right to rip off the country. I guess she's a total scam artist. Anybody knows it. How do you let her get away with it? AOC plus 3. She was one of the 3. They're all scammers. They're so bad for our country. They're so bad for our country.
All right, that tells you where Trump is coming from, and it tells you why this story keeps catching fire. He's not just criticizing her politics. He's questioning integrity, and he's tying it to something voters actually care about, whether leaders see America as a piggy bank. When he says scam artist and scammers, that's not a court finding. That's a political charge meant to frame her as unfit and untrustworthy. You can agree or disagree with his style, but the substance is this. If elected officials preach about rights while people suspect they're connected to fraud, it poisons the whole system. And once the public believes the game is rigged, you don't get unity. You get a country that stops believing anything it's told. Next, we pivot to a separate allegation that's been floating around for years. And it matters because it's about immigration law and personal conduct. You're going to hear a social media post insisting Omar married her full-blooded brother to game the system. That is a serious claim. And because it's a claim, we treat it as alleged unless proven in a court or confirmed by reliable documentation. Still, listen to what's being asserted and why people keep repeating it. So here's the problem with claims like that. If it's false, it's character assassination. If it's true, it's a massive scandal. Either way, the public deserves clarity, not whispers and hashtags. When someone says this is a fact in a post, that doesn't magically make it a fact. It means they're daring institutions to verify it. And institutions in Washington hate verification when it's messy because verification creates consequences. The bigger point is simpler. Regular Americans jump through hoops for paperwork, visas, taxes, and compliance. If a member of Congress ever got special treatment or slipped rules ordinary people must follow, that's not complicated. That's corruption by status. You don't need a law degree to understand that. Now we get to the part that actually connects to process, investigations, oversight, and accountability mechanisms. You're about to hear a mix of a post claiming it's official that Omar is being investigated over reports tied to Somali fraud, and then a discussion about money allegedly being funneled through PACs, plus the role of the House Ethics Committee. Pay attention to the distinction they make between rumor and actionable information.
There are reports that members of Congress are actually receiving daycare and healthcare clinic money funneled through various PACs. If this is true and widespread, how can the American people trust Congress to task and uncover the far-reaching tentacles of this fraud?
Any member of Congress that's getting any money unethically or illegally, there's an ethics committee, and it's a bipartisan. It's an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, and that's the committee that's supposed to investigate members of Congress. The ethics committee was created. We have in our rules that we're not supposed to investigate other members, but the ethics committee has a staff, and that is their sole purpose for existence in life. And I think the House Ethics Committee traditionally has been a lot harder on unethical behavior than the Senate Ethics Committee. That's my opinion. But
that segment is important for one reason. It lays out the pathway. They talk about reports of money, they mention PACs, and they point to the House Ethics Committee as the body that's supposed to take complaints and investigate members. That's not a jury trial, it's internal oversight. But internal oversight is still a big deal because it can lead to findings, sanctions, referrals, and political consequences. And notice the line in the transcript where the speaker says, basically, bring it to the ethics committee and they'll investigate. That's the key. If people have receipts, documents, transactions, communications, that's where it has to go. Not just viral posts, not just rage bait. Also, this is where the media games begin. If the target were a conservative, you'd get a 24/7 countdown clock, dramatized graphics, and sources say panels stacked to the ceiling. When it's a progressive ally, suddenly everyone becomes a delicate little librarian. We must be careful. We can't speculate. We don't have enough context. Funny how that works. The standard shouldn't depend on the jersey. The standard should be, if taxpayer funds were abused and powerful people benefited, the public gets the truth. Now you're going to hear the sharper portion of that same discussion, where Omar is directly named in the conversation, described as at the top of the suspect list in that context, and where they talk about ethics complaints potentially being filed, plus the claim that she didn't show up to address it. Listen for what's asserted and what's acknowledged as unknown. That right there is the tension. On one hand, the speaker openly says in plain terms, I don't know if that's true or not. That's an admission of uncertainty, and it matters. On the other hand, they still say she's at the top of the suspect list and that ethics complaints are coming. That combination is exactly why people feel like Washington runs on vibes until it's forced to run on evidence. And when they say she could have defended herself and didn't, that becomes political oxygen for her critics, because absence gets interpreted as avoidance, whether fair or not. Now let's tie this back to the headline energy people are pushing online. The court narrative, the sentence narrative, the idea that she's finally facing consequences. Based on the inserts you provided, what we can responsibly say is this. There are allegations, there are calls for investigation, there's talk of ethics complaints, and there's political heat coming from the president and from commentators who want accountability. What we cannot do is declare a conviction, declare a real court sentence, or pretend an accusation equals proof. That's how you lose credibility. And credibility is the one thing the establishment can't stand ordinary people having. But even without a courtroom gavel, the stakes are still real. When Minnesota fraud is discussed, it's usually about programs that touch families, childcare, clinics, community services. The kinds of things that get funded with your taxes and are supposed to help real people. If those systems get raided by scammers, it hurts the very communities politicians claim to defend, and it makes the public stingy and cynical about helping anyone at all. That's the tragedy. Corruption poisons charity, and then honest families pay twice, once in taxes and again in broken trust. Here's another uncomfortable truth. A lot of Americans don't need a perfect case file to smell something rotten. They watch how certain people are protected, how questions get dodged, and how the same names keep showing up around the same scandals. Then they're told, stop noticing. That's not going to work anymore. People are tapped out. Groceries cost too much, housing costs too much, the border looks like a suggestion. And then you hear about money being funneled and insiders getting rich. And that's why the ethics angle matters. If you want a country that doesn't tear itself apart, you need a baseline belief that laws apply across the board. The House Ethics Committee, if it actually functions the way it's described in the transcript, is supposed to be the place where evidence goes and where accountability starts. If that process turns into a protection racket, then what's left? Just tribes screaming at each other, while the grifters laugh and cash checks.
But anybody that has information on a member of Congress, bring that to the Ethics Committee and they'll investigate it. And I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat, we need to hold them accountable.
What about Ilhan Omar?
Yeah, well, I mean, she's at the top of the suspect list in that, so we'll see.
Thank you.
But I can tell you, my members, there are going to be ethics complaints filed against Omar. She had an opportunity to come in here today.
Yeah, she was actually right across the hall at the Black Caucus lunch.
If there was anything about Kentucky, I would have been there, and I think that's the way it is with most members, especially the Somali. This is a hearing about Somali fraud. There have been countless reports that her husband has profited in some way, and she in some way.